Greetings, brothers and sisters. So I've been doing this thing for a while. The Age of the, this is The Economist, owned by the Rothschilds family. The Age of Chaos, this is their latest cover. My wife sent me this 2 days ago. And, I do this thing. And it's, I do these little bits and, I get tired of them or whatever. And this year I was like, I don't want to do this, right? I don't. And this is 2025. I said it was the year of the chaos. For a lot of reasons, everything happening at the post-election. I thought, well, when you have year of the amateur, which was 2024, every year you could make a case for the things that I say to be that. I mean, every year they're almost interchangeable, but it seems like there's a little bit more of the things that I end up saying. I started off doing it because I just was talking about Year of the Beast, each one of these things, which was, I think that was 2018. I got the whole thing. I have the whole list somewhere. And, I've kind of done it as a tongue-in-cheek thing. But this year, The Economist is saying it here, the age of the chaos. And, it's chaotic. And, of course, there was this prediction of something going to happen at the end of this year in the Whispers of the Brighter World. And, the lead up to it. But if you have Year of the Amateur, well, what happens when amateurs take over? Well, chaos. And it was an amateur hour on both, the Trump and Kamala Harris, and then just in general last year. And this year, all these people are starting to, after I said this thing that at the end of 2024 is going to be the year of the chaos, now you have The Economist, and then my wife just sent me this yesterday. So the person who wrote this tweet, comes from Twitter, as the word has gone out.
We begin this hour with the chaos.
The average American sees chaos. The American people see chaos.
It's total chaos.
You brought chaos.
It's just complete chaos.
Unleashed an economic chaos.
They unleash chaos.
They are creating chaos.
This chaos.
Oh, there's too much chaos.
Total chaos.
That amidst the chaos,
we're going to see chaos.
After seeing all the chaos,
the chaos he has unleashed on America.
Continue to see the chaos.
Economic chaos.
A lot more chaos.
Trump's chaos.
This is chaos with such chaos.
The chaos.
So this became a talking point. This doesn't matter because it's either chaos or it's not. And it is chaos because nobody knows what's going to happen. So let me switch over to a voiceover here. It goes on. So that's only halfway through it. And, I just don't want to see these annoying people. You get the point, right? They have these annoying, mostly Democrats, saying chaos. But chaos is an accurate description of what's happening. Okay. So before I go to a voiceover, I got a couple of kind of interesting things to read to you. I want to... boy, she looks fucking ghoulish. It's like she's dying. And I didn't do that. That's at 0. Like, that's how it came in. I paused it at 0 with a video. It's not something I did. So what this is about is what's China going to choose, which we'll go through. I'll talk about this more in the voiceover. But she had Fareed Zakaria on, and this conversation took place here.
All right, Fareed Zakaria is out front now, the host of Fareed Zakaria GPS. So, Fareed, while Will was reporting, and Will and I on this show together so many times, and most of his reports go to bars and tone in China. Most of the time they censor them. They did not censor this. A report about a potential invasion of Taiwan, beginning with a U.S. general saying that they are not practicing, that they are literally rehearsing, but these aren't drills. And they don't censor it. What is really at stake here tonight?
These are the highest stakes, and the Trump administration has badly bungled this. The greatest deterrent to a Chinese invasion of Taiwan, which would send, seismic ripples through the world economy, through the international political system, the greatest deterrent was not any weapon we had. It was the fear that China had that they would be decoupled from the American economy. the economy with which they had, for the last 40 years, built a deep interdependent relationship. Trump has fired that gun pointlessly, without a plan, without a strategy. As far as I can tell, the tariffs on...
So this is the important part. Trumpers would say that he's playing 3D chess here. 5D chess, whatever the fuck they say, right? But I don't think so. What I think is, well, first of all, let me say this. That I believe that this system coming down is divine intervention. It's a divine plan. That there's a divine plan here, and there isn't any evidence to me that God would want to save this system. And I said that in a video. I said, why would God want to save the system? And not one person could respond with an answer. Like, not one person said, this is why God would save this system. The only thing that you could say is God gives a shit about what you want and what you need in terms of, being 100% dependent on the system. And that's never been the evidence in history. That God will, even, let's put it this way, even more specifically. It isn't God. It's these divine beings that administer and look over the earth in this case. There's always souls that are there to make sure that the whatever's going on is on a divine plan, right? Because God doesn't have a mind. God doesn't think. And so that's why when you pray and you're witnessing and you're putting things before God, so corrections, divine corrections, things that have gone off the rails because of freedom of choice can be corrected, which inevitably happens, right? And this system's demonic. And so when something's demonic, why would God save something? And the divine beings that are in charge of the divine plan, like there are, beings who are in tune with God that guide, you in your personal life and everybody collectively. When people think of etheric beings, angels or whatever it is. And so there's, there has to be that, right? Because God doesn't think. God doesn't have opinions. God doesn't have any choices. God can't make choices. God is just perfection. So using divinity to bring about divinity, right? So this is what these beings would do. So in terms of saving America, it isn't really about God or, because God is just, perfection and doesn't have the ability to choose to do the wrong thing. It's that there's our contingencies and there's, consciousness that has to come in and figure things out and, change things when we've gone astray. And we've gone astray. Like everyone can look at the fucking world and go, we've gone astray, right? And so if that's, the outcome, then the destruction of the system is divine work. And so Trump is either doing it just because he's like a boob, and he's just a klutz, a moron, a dunce, a dope, right? Which is what he appears to be. But he's doing God's work unintentionally, not on a soul level, or maybe it's just, whatever. Which is to facilitate the end of a system that's bad for everybody. It's bad for the Americans, it's bad for the Chinese, it's bad for the world. So, I look at it that way, like that's a higher way to look at it. Then there's just the official story and watching this moron wreck the world, right? Which is, there's divine reasons behind it. It's part of a plan, so, he can't be, it's just supposed to be what's happening. But it's also watching some, like, Don Knotts moron, Three Stooges guy come in and just, do stupid shit that hopes that it's going to work out. And what this is about here is, what is China going to do? And so this was kind of interesting what Fareed Zakaria said here.
China were raised to 145% simply because he wanted to save face. He was backtracking and flip-flopping on all the other tariffs, so he needed to turn China into his punching bag. But because of that, what he has done is play into China's hardliners' hands. They have been waiting for this decoupling. They practiced it during COVID. They practiced it during the Shanghai lockdown. And now what they're going to say is, look, if we go into Taiwan, what do we have to lose? We've already been cut off from the American market.
I mean, it is stunning to consider that this may be where this goes. You talk about the...
So, China invading Taiwan, and, they have this thing with Hong Kong and, these things, right? But some of the reasons not to invade Taiwan is backlash from America and the globe and the other countries, right? But what he's saying here is there are hardliners in China who have been planning to decouple from American economy, and that would cause pain in both countries. China holds all this American debt, and they supply us with 40% of our cheap goods. And, America has this massive market. And what Trump has been saying and thinking, and this is, echoed by Mr. Wonderful and Bill O'Reilly in 2 videos ago, that, China is the real problem. That this is, what Fareed Zakaria is saying here is that Trump had to back off all the other tariffs. And then Trump just gave exemptions to technical companies like Apple, so the iPhones aren't going to be $3,000. And with the idea that, and I think I have that somewhere coming up, Carolyn Levitt says that, we'll see if we, whatever she says, you'll probably see it, but that eventually these companies will move to America. They're working to move to America, but up until that time, they're going to be free from tariffs. But Trump had to back off on all these tariffs. He got denutted to whatever extent. And so China was the one country that raised tariffs on their side and said, fuck you to Trump, so Trump is going after them. And these guys, like Mr. Wonderful, was saying this was always about China anyway. China is bad actors, and Trump is finally taking on China the way it needs to be taken on. But there's, issues with America in terms of the American people. Chinese people are completely, dominated by their government and their culture. And they're much more, it's a much more abusive situation in terms of freedom of speech and ability to speak out against the government. And so they'll just knuckle under. Both countries are going to suffer, but America and Americans are going to let Trump know. And Trump doesn't like to be disliked. And so, he's banking on that China doesn't want to lose America as a customer. Like this is like a customer complaint from America, because we're China's biggest customer and the biggest market. And so, he's betting, and Trump has said this in numerous occasions in recent videos I've covered this. China isn't going to want to. He's saying what his strategy is. China isn't going to want to lose our market. But what Fareed Zakaria is saying here, which I totally believe, is there are hardliners in China that knew at some point that they would have to decouple from America, that they would have to lose America as a customer. And, there is definitely a plan in China to take over the top spot. I know that for a fact because that's just human nature. And countries and, these teams and anything that's, there's competition here. And the other thing is RFK Jr., when he was interviewing, when he was doing good interviews, and he was talking truth, this was in the beginning of his campaign when he made this circuit, around all these people, Joe Rogan and, Lex, whatever his name, Lex Friedman, all these people, right? And he said that when his uncle was president, when they used to give money away, like this USAID, they were doing it in such a way that was building good faith with these other countries. That his uncle was winning over country by country by helping them, like not just financially, but whatever America could do. And they were helping democracy, and they were building, good alliances in these things. And when he was shot after that, America stopped doing that in a productive way. But China has been doing that. China has been ingratiating themselves to these various countries around the world. And Trump is also trying to get everyone to choose America over China, which is, we'll show you that with the whole thing with, I have that clip from the Barbie, the fake Christian Barbie, fake truther, Carolyn Levitt. A clip I already showed you, but like it's somebody took the clip and put a title that she's always insulting the Chinese. And so what they're trying to do is ask people to choose, it's like sometimes in life you have to do that, right? You have to choose between two things you might love. But they don't love China or America. Like I've seen, there's multiple TV shows and movies I've seen lately where the British people are, there's a choice between China and America. And they are insulting both of them, right? The Capture TV show where it's about CCTV and they have a technology, they have to buy technology from either U.S. or China. And they know that whoever they buy that technology is going to spy on them through the technology. Like it's a whole thing, right? They know that America and China are like, America's the great Satan. Of course, China is just a despicable, godless country. And untrustworthy and cheating. But they're all cheaters. So, this is where we're at, right? And so Trump is banking on China not wanting to lose America as a customer. But there are definitely people in China, and there's definitely a plan there that someday that this would have to happen, where China and America will part ways and go out full out war economically at first, and then a war, like a real war. And they've been banking on this, and Trump is clearly not prepared for that. Like Trump doesn't have a backup plan if China, and he just doesn't. Like because a lot of the shit he's doing seems very impulsive, and that's what Fareed Zakaria is saying here. Like he's just doing things to save face or whatever. But he's not this isn't a long-time American plan. Maybe there's people in Trump's cabinet, and there's certainly people that want to do this with China. Like Kevin O'Leary wants them to bully China. But they don't have any plan after that. Like Kevin O'Leary said that that Xi Jinping will come to America and beg America back to remove the tariffs and make a deal. And they'll stop cheating and they'll be held more accountable. Like that's what he thinks is going to happen. But what if they don't do that, right? What if they say, fuck you, we're going to fucking live without you as a customer? What if that's, and more and more we see this in the world where the customer isn't right. The customer isn't always right. We see this in America. That happened during COVID. And what if China's like, fuck you guys, we don't care. We'll survive without you. We'll bite the bullet and, we'll take our economic loss and, and also who's the world going to blame when this goes south? Because this is going to affect the world economy. And so this is, Trump's going to be, who are they going to blame? Trump or the Chinese? So this is where it's coming down to this kind of shit, right? Like this is the year of the chaos where like anything can happen. Like who knows what China's going to do here? Like Trump's putting the ball in their court. They have all the power to decide the future of the world economy by what they do. Like are they going to keep it status quo and make some bullshit deal with America? And if they do make a bullshit deal with America, is that, a plan later on to say, fuck you? Like, is it a temporary fix to just, make some kind of deal with America and then to renege on that deal 6 months later or a year later because now they're prepared, if they're fully prepared. And it's like he said, there's a battle within China of hardliners who have been planning and wanting to do this. And so I believe that they have a much more cohesive plan than the Americans have a cohesive plan. Because American presidents change, in this case, every 4 years. So we had a Trump presidency, a Biden presidency, now a Trump presidency. And Trump is a completely different guy now and a completely different president from his first term. And so, there is some contingency plans for the intelligence community, but not the economic community. Like they're just all over the place here because it's Biden economics versus Trump economics, right? And Biden was a very pro-Chinese guy. He was owned by the Chinese. So this is, the whole thing is, unless Trump is doing this with China, like as a part of some controllers thing to take down the global economy. Like, that's obviously something that could be a reality. That Trump is just following orders from his economic masters who are wanting him to do this. And if that's the case, which is, very highly likely, it's to bring in the World Economic Forum, that you'll own nothing and love it, right? So like a new deal America's getting, a new world order type of thing. So, this is a kind of mess that is created by somebody like this, that Trump is, he's not conscious of being a dope, right? Like dopes aren't. But he's being used as his like impulsive in his impulsive nature, and just thinking he'll bully the Chinese, and that that's the outcome he's been kind of promised, but it's not the outcome that his controllers want to have happen, right? Like I said, nobody wants to save America. The people who control the system, the controllers, and God, neither one are wanting America to America's done. It's an empire that's collapsing for all the reasons. The immorality starting off with the people themselves, right? The degradation of the people and the idiocracy.
The path from tariffs to war, a precipitous one. In China, I want to just show this. Will Ripley, showed that post that the foreign ministry recently posted on X. So this post, Fareed, has now 13 million views. So what it's of is the former leader Mao Zedong speaking during the Korean War era. Now that is the last time, the Korean War, when China and America were actually at physical war, clashing on a battlefield. Right? That's being posted now. And he says, in part, Mao, no matter how long this war lasts, we will never yield. And that is trending now in China. I know this feeds into what you're talking about, but the symbolism here is so cultural.
So first of all, you're fucked when you got a haircut like that. There's a long comment I got from somebody saying that I don't know shit about China, which I don't. In the way people know things. But I know things because, you're the fucking chaos, right? How many times have I been right about shit and I'm just bullshitting? I don't take any of this stuff seriously. I don't give a fuck. I know the system's collapsing. But I'll get into that. It's a long comment. Someone chastising me for not knowing the real China. And I didn't get through it. It's a long-ass comment, right? But this is all you need to know. Look at this motherfucker's haircut. Now, Mao is, the whole thing, remember the Beatles had songs about Chairman Mao and, the whole thing with that. And the Mao was just whatever. But him saying we will never yield. And so, they want to break China. Like that's what Kevin O'Leary said. If you remember, my last two videos had that in it. Where he wants to break them. He wants to put 400% tariffs and make China come to the table. But that's only if China isn't willing to lose America as a customer. And yeah, we're 25% of the economy right now, so it would be be painful for them. But at some point, it's going to happen, right? There's going to be war between China and America. There's prophecies. This is Nostradamus shit, where the bear and the dragon or something will crush the eagle. There's some kind of shit like that. China and Russia, and so, like this is the end of America. Like it just is. Like we did maybe not today with this, but it's coming. This is the battle lines. Like, what's clear is that we're at a war with China. Like, China's fucking us over economically, but we're 100% dependent on them for cheap goods and things. And the American people aren't going to be like, hey, where's our shit? When they go to Walmart, there's no more Chinese shit to buy, right? Where's all our cheap Chinese shit to buy? And, and the prices go up. And the American people are going to flip the fuck out because they have no idea. The average American people have no idea how close we are to collapsing. They don't watch Truth or Shit. They don't watch the WEF say that you'll own nothing and like it. They don't know the plan. They don't believe any of that shit. And they're oblivious to how bad it can get, how quickly. They don't remember how, like, they went to the grocery store and there was no canned goods and toilet paper within 2 days after COVID. They don't realize how much cash was taken out. That I went to a bank and they said they didn't have any money left. Then they didn't know when they would have money again because the bank doesn't have fucking money and people are asking for cash because of COVID. And that was just fucking COVID. They don't know how quickly the banks will collapse and how people will realize that their money isn't fucking in their banks and all that shit when people panic and go into runs. And Americans will fucking panic and they'll be like, Americans own a lot more guns than any other country, right? 400 guns are out there, 400 million guns for, 345 million people. And so there's more than one gun per person. And so it's a lot easier, it's a lot harder to, a lot easier to push back against disarmed people in these other countries. And so when chaos sets in, and there's no shit in your grocery store and everything's expensive and, they put in this stuff, America will descend. There's a lot of ex-military and people like that in America, and there's a whole thing. It's a lot harder to, get the American people under their thumb Trump will go to martial law, right? But it won't be the same as what China already has in place. And so, they're banking everything on what China does here. And like I said, they might agree this month, but China has a plan to fuck America over at some point, and they can. Like both of them, America can kill China, and China can kill America economically, like because a customer and the maker of the goods, right? The store and the customer. In this case, America's dependent on China as a store, and China's dependent on America as a customer. But at some point, like you said, they're going to decouple.
Culturally significant.
The beginning of China's modern history that every school child is taught in history books is that China was forced and humiliated by Western powers, including the United States, in the 19th century, and had to back down and had to accept humiliation and a kind of neo-colonial arrangement with the foreign powers. And the message of Chinese history is never yield like that again. We will never allow ourselves to be put in a position like that. Look, and the Chinese have a fairly strong hand. A lot of the things the United States imports from China, precursors to chemical, pharmacy, drugs, chemicals, minerals. These are all core things, computer chips. I think I saw one number that said 60% of the chips we import are Chinese chips. We need that stuff. It's not going to be easy to find it somewhere else. You can't find rare earth all over the world. The Chinese, on the other hand, a lot of what they get from us.
What about the Ukraine?
Agriculture, soybeans, things like that, they can get from elsewhere. And most importantly, don't forget, China is a dictatorship. Xi Jinping doesn't have to worry about public opinion in quite the same way that Donald Trump has to worry about.
So I didn't get this far in the video. Just so you know that when I said that, like that was my own opinion. I didn't hear it from him. But I mean, it's just obvious, right? Like this is not, this is just pointing something obvious out. Like it was easy for me to see. Like, and I'm just sitting here in my bed with my two dogs. Like I can just look at the fucking, this show. Like this is like predicting the end of a show. You're watching a show and like we were watching The White Lotus. It's funny because I was watching, during the time I watch TV alone, I'm watching this show called The Leftovers, which I've talked about. And my wife and I are watching White Lotus, which I kind of was like, it's kind of a gross show, but this wasn't, there's really some really gross storylines in this one. But it isn't as it's a little bit more subtle than the other two seasons. The second season was really bad. But it's about how rich people implode at these, these high-end vacation places, these White Lotus vacation facilities. And what's interesting about, my thing is there's the characters in the dystopian, post-apocalyptic show, The Leftovers, where these people have sort of left the earth, like 2% of the people, causing chaos. They just vanish, like in the Revelations. And it's like unclear whether that's anything to do with God. They're trying to, it's a battle between atheism and God. It's a kind of interesting show. A lot of drama, a lot of, there was a big issue with the, sometimes the timelines are wrong. Like, they've made some mistakes in the thing. But the female lead is also in The White Lotus, and the father of the because these are both HBO shows, so that sometimes they have actors under contract, right? But the father of the male lead is also he's a prominent figure in both at least in the Leftovers show. But in the White Lotus show, it starts off with gunfire in the resort and a body floating by, which one of the younger characters discovers, the son of a recurring character from the first season. And, this is the White Lotus first season 1. It started off with an airport where a body is being shipped out in a coffin, like somebody gets killed. And the people who you're gonna meet as the character, being introduced to these characters, are all sitting kind of freaked out and depressed in the airport. So they start off in the future, and you know this is going to happen. You know there's going to be gunplay. And so they introduce various guns during the show, right? And so, you know, you see these sort of mystery type of whodunit things. You know, they're often give you, like, sometimes they'll give you red herrings. But for the most part, when a TV show or movie introduces a storyline, it's like, well, that's going to come back up later, right? So you can kind of predict the future just by looking at the show because they're telling you what's going to happen, right? So for years, all of us were told that there was a terrorist group called Al-Qaeda. This is before 9/11, right? And so Al-Qaeda was put out there. And right before it happened, the big event, 2001, 9/11, they kept on saying Al-Qaeda, Al-Qaeda, Al-Qaeda. And when it happened that day, I remember saying, oh, I bet Al-Qaeda did it. And I was thinking, well, that's what they want me to say. Like, I wasn't nearly the kind of truther I am now. Like, I hadn't had what people had my wake-up moment, but of course I was aware. But, you know, they pre-program these storylines, and then they give you, like, they're giving you the answer ahead of time. They're preparing you for something, and then you're supposed to find the answer, right? And so these are the answers. Like, these are the things that are being said, these storylines, and this is, you know, partially the outcome. And so, you know, you're able to figure things out because it's just right there. You know, Trump is forced China to make a decision. Again, this idea what Fareed Zakaria says, like, I don't know if this is true or not, but it sounds kind of right. And then they have this clip of Mao saying we will never yield. You know, what they're referring to here is England, the East Indian Company, whatever what it was called, started to extract gold from India. So you had these guys, this was these family that was known as the Rothschilds of India, and they started to take India's gold. And they used India's gold to get the Chinese soldiers addicted to heroin. They imported heroin to China, and then they took over China. And the Chinese have never gotten over that. And they consider America an extension of England, the British Empire. That's what Fareed Zakaria is referring to. And they're still pissed about that and want revenge. Like, you know, this happened like over 100 years ago, right? Or whatever it was. And so this, they still want revenge from that shit, right? Like, they're still pissed about that. And they hold long-term grudges, like against Japan for what happened in World War II and these other things. You know, Japan had to apologize. Yeah, you can look that shit up, right? So, like, there's that. So this is what we're dealing with here. Anyways.
About it.
No, you also just came out with an op-ed, Fareed, and you talk about the terrorists. And in this, you write about your own context on it, growing up in India, a country obviously riddled with tariffs and where, I mean, no business could survive of any size. It was all about what kind of government handout you were getting or who, you know, you were. It was corruption. You go on to say, when I got to America, I was thrilled to see that most businesses went about their work with little care as to who was in the White House. But now I watch tech pioneers give interviews slavishly extolling Trump's genius, and Wall Street titans race to post North Korea-style congratulations to the president for his brilliance in rescuing the economy from his own actions. And I wonder, what country am I living in? You know, how significant is this moment for you, Fareed, as you see this?
It's a very sad moment, honestly, because to me, you know, as a kid coming to America, America was the city on the hill, the shining example of how a modern economy should work. You have a market, you have rules, you have laws, you know, everybody plays.
Jesus, Fareed. Take it easy there, buddy.
By them. It doesn't matter whether you know the prime minister, the president, you know, a senator. That wasn't important. What was important was the merit. Did you have a good product? Could you sell it to people? And now when you look at the orgy of corruption that is going to be unleashed,
that's a great line there, orgy of corruption. See, you know, the bureaucracy and you know, like what he's talking about here is payoffs, where people have to pay off government officials. You know, government officials are considered like celebrities to avoid tariffs or whatever it is, right? a lot of arbitrary rules and laws which make people have to do a lot of payoffs. You know, like there was we had a maid when we were in India. Like we had one before my ex left and she came back to America, and that was the whole thing, and one after that. And the one before was, and again, you know, we weren't rich. Like they paid $70 a month, like just nothing. But like everyone had them, and like, you know, I felt uncomfortable because my kids were used to doing chores. It was a whole thing, right? So I never felt comfortable with this. But like you have cheap labor there, and we paid our maid like under $70 a month for, I mean, you know, almost daily work, right? So it's crazy. But they, you know, American dollars worth so much more there. And there's just so many people that they'll do, you know, shit work for little money, right? But this woman came in and asked for money because her husband was a rickshaw driver, these what they call tuk-tuks in Sri Lanka, with these three-wheel rickshaws. They're open, right? They're like cabs, but they're, you know, like motorcycles with a seat, you know, like for people to sit in the back. And he got into an accident with another rickshaw driver, and they start waving their hands and talking shit, and, you know, they're not fighting. And a cop comes up and threatens both of them, and they both have to pay off the cop. And the cop leaves, like doesn't deal with this, you know, like just so they don't get tickets and restrictions, and, you know, just so the cop just shows up to get paid off, and she needed money, right? But like, you know, coming to us and like whatever, and this was a whole kind of thing that happened, and, you know, we talked to people, you know, these sob stories. This actually happened, but like, you know, her husband and the rickshaw driver should have realized they're both fucked and drove off before they have to pay off the cop, who's inevitably going to show up looking for a corruption handout. Like the corruption there is just off the charts. And that's what Fried's reacting to here. That when you have all these rules, now you have people in positions to get paid off. People who can, you know, look the other way and let you smuggle in goods without tariffs. And then all of a sudden businesses become something more shady and all this shit because of the bureaucracy. You know, Trump's adding more government, right? This, you know, the Republicans were supposed to be the party of no government, right? Low government. He's getting rid of these government agencies, but he's going to make the economy now have all these people to inspect all these connexes, you know, these shipping containers, and just all of it. It's just going to be fucking just layers and layers of bureaucracy, and then all the kickbacks, and, you know, it's going to invite in organized crime, and, you know, whatever it is. That's what he's referring to here. And so, you know, but Trump is dealing with the real problem, which is China, you know, in a sloppy Trump way. And so, like, this is what I'm talking about. It's chaos. Like, nobody knows how this is going to fucking play out, right? You're basically, you know, playing fucking roulette here or some, you know, gambling game, and, you know, basing it on a corrupt country in China making a decision that could fuck everybody in the world economically and the system itself.
We have studies already from the first Trump term. Firms that gave money to Republicans got more exemptions than firms that gave money to Democrats. You know, already you have Vietnam saying we're gonna expedite the Trump organization's project. Real estate projects are being signed in 19 countries with the Trump organization right now. You know,
Trump's getting it. He's all of a sudden, people are kissing his ass, which Trump loves, right? I mean,
all of it says to you that this is an economy where political favor, knowing people, all that has become the key, not the market, which was the glory of the American economy.
All right, Fried, thank you very much. And I just want to show everyone what is on screen right now in China as this report aired. As I said, this is just when Fried was talking about Mao Zedong. When we had that particular part of the conversation, it went to bars, Fried. The rest of the conversation, Will Ripley's report, all of that, they did not censor. I say that just...
So look at that, right? So this is what, you know, this is a fucking war, right? There's been a war for a while. And now it's an economic war. And, you know, there's going to be economic pain. Again, trying to make a quick deal, but we'll see. We'll see how this plays out. You know, it inevitably, we know, like, battle lines have been drawn. Like, China has been at war with America, even though we're the customer. And, you know, I mean, I don't get Chinese stuff, like things made in China. I don't trust any of it, right? because, they're at war with our country, right? Like, so, you're ingesting things from a place that has poisoned their own people. Remember, they were putting this protein powder in milk to raise the protein, and it was poisonous. Remember that whole thing that happened? And that shit happens all the time there. Let me show you a few more things, and I'll read the comments. Okay, so this title of the video is Levitt Continues to Insult China.
Could just add to what the secretary said. Many of you in the media clearly missed the art of the deal. You clearly failed to see what President Trump is doing here. You tried to say that the rest of the world would be moved closer to China when in fact we've seen the opposite effect. The entire world is calling the United States of America, not China, because they need our markets, they need our consumers, and they need this president in the Oval Office to talk to them. And that's exactly why more than 75 countries have called, because the United States of America is the best place in the world to do business. And as the president has shown great courage, as the secretary has said, in choosing to retaliate against China even higher.
Okay.
And as the president has.
So, again, she didn't say because they love America, because they don't, right? And people are going to have to choose between China and America, and they both have a leverage. And so, like, again, Trump is a bully, and he's used to people saying, yes, Mr. Trump, yes, Mr. Trump. A fake billionaire and a celebrity. And he had a lot of yes men. Trump, oh, yeah, Trump, like the way Trump ran. And so the people around him, he's used to having yes men and people just saying, oh, you're so great, Mr. Trump. He doesn't like when he fired people. Remember when Steve Bannon was his guy? And Steve Bannon started to, question some of his stuff, and they called Steve Sloppy Steve. He blows people out who end up criticizing him or end up questioning some of the things he does, or he does stupid, weird shit anyway in his personal life that makes people around him like, holy shit, this guy's a creep. And he has all these people, Chris Christie, his former fixer, Cohen, that guy Cohen, his lawyer. He's got all these people he has blowouts with. John Bolton, they're inside him. They're the best people. I hire the best people, and then they realize Trump's a piece of shit, or they say something he doesn't like, or he has to throw somebody under the bus. And so Trump is just used to people catering to him, as a businessman and now as president. And they're all doing deals with him. I'm sure, like what Fareed Zakaria said about all these countries doing deals with him. Apple contributed to Trump, the big tech companies did, and now he's giving them exemptions. Elon Musk, he's the people who are with him. You're with Trump, I'll take care of you when I pull this bullshit, right? And so, that's, corruption at the highest levels and just out there blatantly. And these countries that are kissing Trump's ass, they don't you think they want to kiss Trump's ass, right? You think they want that? No, of course not. So, this is, again, it seems like they're choosing America over China today, but I'm sure China's working behind the scenes to get secure deals here and whatever, long-term plan to undercut America and become the number one country. That's what China's working at. We saw it back in the Olympics when you saw, some of the shit that they were doing. Chinese people, like these boxes that were going up and down like pistons, and all of a sudden they came out, it was people inside there doing it, right? And so, they are pissed off about the way they've been treated by the Western world. They have long-term grudges against England and now, America. And they have a strategy, right? They're playing the long game. Trump wrote that stupid thing, Art of the Deal, which is him just bullying people by having more leverage than the other people. And it seems like he has leverage. But what if the people say, I don't care, fuck you, we'll just go, we'll see what happens. They have a plan, they have something in place here. They're aware of this inevitable end where Trump says, oh, they'll never believe us. We're the ones, this is like Trump cheating on his wives and whatever. Oh, she'll never leave me because, I'm fucking Trump, this shit. Like he doesn't see a reality in which China says, fuck you, we're going to take you down. We'll both go down, but we'll, who will bounce back better. And so, that's what's up here.
A war of words is spewing over US Vice President J.D. Vance's recent comments about, quote, Chinese peasants. On Tuesday, Beijing slammed Vance for his comments that have drawn widespread ire and ridicule on China's internet in comparisons with Vance's own self-proclaimed hillbilly background. Our Will Ripley has the story.
Well, good morning, everybody.
The American hillbilly versus China's so-called peasants. It all started with this.
And to make it a little bit more crystal clear, we borrow money from Chinese peasants to buy the things those Chinese peasants manufacture. From Chinese peasants.
Vance's Chinese peasants comment reaching Beijing within hours. The government's response? Swift and scathing.
It's both astonishing and lamentable to hear this vice president make such ignorant and disrespectful remarks.
On China's tightly controlled internet, government censors are allowing Vance's interview to go viral, amplifying the outrage, igniting anger and sarcasm. Have you said thank you for the money we lent you? A reference to China being the second largest foreign holder of U.S. government debt. And that.
So, this is war talk, right? This is war talk. Like, this is where they're this is, we're going to war with these people. They're saying to America what Trump said to Zelensky, right? Do you say thank you, right? You thank you for the money. What Vance and Trump are saying to Zelensky, China's saying to them. Like, this is like war talk, right? This is like, there's a lot of fuck you going on, right? This is a lot of shit talk and a lot of fuck you going on now. And so let me switch over to voiceover. Okay, so this is all going to come back to China, but let me start off here. So when I used to go to India, there was people from all over the world, and these were all spiritual seekers. So, they would go through cleaning and have some emotional stuff, and, different people from different countries would act out in different ways, or whatever. But for the most part, these were, better people, like people who live better lives, people who had enough money to travel, and people who have some desire for spiritual evolution. And, I met people from like Madagascar and, all over the world. And, there was a time my son, we went to the first gathering, he was like the star of the ashram. Like, he was just meeting all these people, and like I was looking at him, like as we were walking, and there's a cart being pulled by some cows, with like colored horns. And my son's on time, like he's in the cart. And he was like, I was talking to him. I was like, my Chinese friends. And he was meeting people from all over the world. And like, it was kind of interesting. Like, he was really social, and he was my youngest. And, he came like a different person during that first gathering, right? And, there was people from the Ukraine and Russia. And, some of them were my Facebook friends. And I had looked them up when, I hadn't seen posts from them because I sort of banned everybody from Heartfulness because of the whole thing with Dodgy, the whole thing. A lot of my Facebook friends were putting all that dodgy bullshit out, and I just didn't want to look at it. So I started to, ban them or unfriend them. People I didn't really know anyway. But there were two girls particularly that were, I think one was from Russia, one was from Ukraine, and one was definitely from the Ukraine. I'm not sure if the other one's from Russia or the Ukraine. But they were really good friends, and they hung out all the time. And I think their parents were doctors or something. They came from some money. And they spent a lot of time with Master Charji. And they really wanted him to arrange a marriage. And they dressed in Indian saris, and they were just into it. So I'd seen these girls for 2 years. They were like living in India. And they both married Indian men. But the one girl, Charji, arranged a marriage. And Charji stopped arranging marriages for Westerners. People outside of the Indian culture. Because they just were unsuccessful. It's not for us, right? Because we're just built on being consumers and having our own freedom of choice and having like some random person pick for you, it doesn't work. Like, it's not something that, so he didn't do it, but he did it for these two girls. And one girl I've seen, she has a kid and she's with her Indian husband. The other girl, I knew, when we were there, that Charji arranged the marriage, and the guy was really into it. Like, the guy wanted to marry her, and she was into it. And the family said no, the Indian family. they were prejudiced against this woman, and they were Abhiasis in charge. He was like upset about it. Like they were like this. There was in the Indian culture, you don't disobey the guru. Like they go to the guru to arrange marriages. Like they come to Charji and say, please find a suitable person for my child. And he found this woman who was an Indian, and they said, fuck you, this is not what we're doing, right? So it was a whole thing. But she eventually married an Indian guy, and I didn't see her. She used to post a lot on Facebook, and I don't go on Facebook, but, and after a while, people just fade from your Facebook feed because you don't interact with them. So, like, and a lot of people might have unfriended me because I called Dodgy a little bitch, right? So, like, so a lot of people I unfriended, and, I didn't really have as many of these people who are my friends anymore. And so I looked at the people I knew who were from the Ukraine. Like, I had there was a guy I talked to and had some long conversations, but this guy was really spiritual, like one of those people that's really like etheric and, almost like not there. And I don't think this guy has social media. I never was friends with him on social media. But he was someone who was probably a little bit less wealthy than some of the other people there. The people who can travel from these countries and spend, months in India are usually, whatever would be privileged people in these countries, right? So, but I looked at the people I knew that I was friends with Facebook. This is like a year or two ago. There was one woman who I never met, but she was from the Ukraine, and she sells clothes, and she was constantly posting on Facebook like glamour shots. And she posted some war stuff, but it was like stuff from CNN. Like, she didn't have local people with like clips on social media, like YouTube clips of local people who were posting things. And I was questioning, like, is there even a war there? Because, they're just taking Western coverage. Like, these are people who would post in their native language, Ukrainian, and then post CNN clips in American, in English. And, it just didn't make any sense. So, like, this one woman posted a little bit, but this other woman, this girl I was talking about who had the arranged marriage, she is now divorced and living back in the Ukraine. And she had like photos of like celebrities that she met. There's that guy. Let me see if I can find the guy's name. I think it was this guy. I'm not sure, but it's Neil McDonough. And she was like on a red carpet dressed in some like, red carpet gown and meeting these weird American celebrities in the Ukraine or some, I don't know what it was, right? But she wasn't posting about the war. And like she was, whatever. And so, I had checked a couple of times. There's a couple other people who were Ukrainian, and none of them were posting shit from the war. And I'm like, do they even like have any personal evidence that they're at war, right? Like, they were saying things sometimes, but it was almost like the things to get sympathy. People who are like, oh, this is happening to me. I mark themselves safe or some bullshit like that, right? So in that. This was posted yesterday. So this girl posted this. There is a picture of somebody, and it says, Svetak, who is this? And this is in English. It wasn't something I had to translate. Who is this? This is a soul that came to this planet to transmit codes of higher dimensions. Svetak, spiritual energies of awakening, healing, and light activation of the cell. I passed my next activation training with beautiful Natalia Malarga, and I'm happy spending sessions using this method for a whole week. It's a super experience to see how plasma energy, thanks to the session, is very unique, helps a person restore integrity in thoughts, emotions, and body. During one session, huge unpacking of divine light codes of DNA and the soul takes place, thanks to which the session is easily and efficiently. Thanks to which the session is easily and efficiently. That does make sense. Diving into past lives, if relevant to the client, looking at the soul's mission on this incarnation, letting go of the past and download the important resources. Thank you to those who came out. Pretty cool to live in this quantum experience. This is someone in Ukraine, right? Writing this. There are places for recording a special price of €55 for 2 sessions. there are 2 places left. Let me find I had to take 2 screenshots. Souls in 2 places left. The cost of the session will be for 125 euros to 333 euros, depending on the complexity of the inquiry of the message from the stream. And I think this is either a picture of her, until we meet again, dear souls, or I guess this was translated automatically, but I didn't translate it. I didn't hit the translate button. There was a picture of her, and it's glowing with an aura, or some other woman. I don't know. It looks like the girl from the thing. But, it struck me because this girl was really into Sajmark. Like, she was living in India and wanted to marry into the mission and live in India with somebody else, like an Indian spouse. I mean, like, just into it, right? And the shit she's putting out here is like the kind of opposite of Sajmark stuff, and it's for a fee. How quickly people bail on something, right? She maybe didn't like Dodgy, and Dodgy's, people are leaving the mission because of Dodgy. And that's okay, that makes sense. But if you believe in the system, I do, like, it's helped me immensely, and are in any way affected by the transmission and cleaning and the effectiveness of the system, of the Sajmark system, you would find a way, like I found a way with the Gratefullness meditation. But people are bailing and then just doing some fucking other bullshit thing, right? So, like, did you ever, if you were going to commit that much to it, and this is someone in a war-torn Ukraine. And so then I got this comment. Let me read this comment, because these things go together. This is about China. And the person writes this. And so this is to my video. Pouty Trump, Mr. Wonderful, and Bill O'Reilly admit to what I've been saying for years. The views you share, rooted in personal experience, especially how you critique systems and societies like the U.S., and you raise important points deep rooted in issues. But when it comes to China, there is a noticeable disconnect. And I don't know if this person edited the comment. Let me see if I have a screenshot of the original thing here. So the person edited the comment. I respected your passion and personal lens through which you view the world. It's clear your experience have shaped how you critique systems and societies, especially the U.S., and you raise important points about its deep-rooted issues. When it comes to China, I feel there's a disconnect in your approach. You spent time in India, immersed yourself in the culture, and you speak from experience there. You lived through, observed America firsthand, but you speak about China without having visited, engaged with the Chinese people, or studied their lived realities. It starts to sound like you're echoing the same Western media narratives you rightly criticize elsewhere. So there's some differences in these 2 things. The one, I took a screenshot of it. But let me just say this. This is what I read up to, and I saw this was really long. What I do here, first of all, I don't know America. Like, I've been all over America. I've lived in the 4 corners of America. Like, I grew up in Connecticut, which is in the northeast corner. Not Maine, but, pretty close to Maine, right? And near New York and Boston, Massachusetts and New York and this areas. And I traveled around those areas and knew those areas, and then would travel to Florida, which I eventually lived in. So would drive down the East Coast, and, I've lived in some of these states and visited them and spent time in these states. North Carolina, I lived in Virginia, spent time, camping and like 6 months in North Carolina, these various places. Spent time in South Carolina, lived in Atlanta. So this whole East Coast I'm familiar with, right? These areas and the people there. But, I don't know shit about it. Like, there's, 345 million people. I lived in New Mexico for a while, then later on I lived in Nevada and Utah, and then in Idaho for a little bit. And so, and I drove through various states and had experiences of America, going to places. But, the cultures and the accents and it's different cultural places. No one could know through experience the whole country. And then there's, of course, the news and the national shit. But, the local stuff, nobody can ever know. And certainly I would never profess to say I know India from being in Chennai and the little time in Hyderabad and traveling around to various places. But again, there's 1 billion people there, and they have all these different cultures. They have, I think 500 total languages. And they have all these places. There's a place where 90,000 people speak a language, and they don't speak it anywhere else in India, right? And they have, like, of the major languages, there's, I think, 20 or something, major different languages in the country. And there's prejudice and, cultural issues. I mean, Charji used to arrange marriages between these people in different parts of the country, and it caused huge problems in the families. Like, one couple was talking to me, and, it's a place where you really can't get a gun very easily. And both families got guns, and we're going to go after the other family because Charji arranged a marriage between, like it was a spiritual marriage and not ones that the families wanted, right? And they had very interesting stories. And so, I would never be able to know any of these things from overall experience, right? But my ability to just connect and see, Charji used to go from country to country and just be able to nail the country and say, things about it. He did it with America, and I saw him do it with other places. He was just good at understanding things from just a, intuitional, spiritual perspective. And I have some of that in me. That's why I'm able to do what I do here. But I don't know shit. Like, it's not from experience. Yeah, I've traveled and I've been interacting, but your interactions are very slim. It's hard to say you even know your spouse, right? People don't even know their significant others. People don't know their family members. So, knowing whole vast amount of people, but there's tendencies and there's, true stereotypes and there's things that are there, right? I've always been an observant person. And I listen to people talk about their interactions, and pretty much everything I've heard about people have had experience with working with Chinese people, working with the Chinese system, it's bad. And there's people who are in the ashram, that had conflict from countries and things like this, people from all over the world. And China had a bad reputation, just like, people didn't like me because I was American. And they looked at me as I was arrogant and American. I got into an argument with this Danish woman, and there's a kind of a nice Danish girl who she was like probably 10 years younger than me. She was young, she's probably around 18, 19. But her parents were Abhyasis, and she just had a very spiritual presence. And she's sitting there watching me argue with this woman. And I was just in a mood, like, I don't give a shit. But I could see that these people were judging me for being American. And some of the things were true. Like, I'm not the typical American, but I have some, we just have a different lifestyle. I dealt with this, this weird relationship I had with this Russian girl. We weren't like dating or anything, but we hung out for a while. And, she would get annoyed at me for being American because she suffered from, Russian, like whatever. Like, the Russian was a much more difficult. And like, I don't know how much it's jealous or just, like seeing the idea of privilege and things that people have. But I understood that, like that people had legitimate reasons to see, things that they see in Americans. Like some of these things are stereotypical, right? Like I saw a French, I was traveling and I went on to a gathering and I was traveling with 25 people from Europe and they had so much fucking drama and so much bullshit. And some of it was not in English, but I was around it and I didn't want to be around it. Like I was grouped with them, but I wanted no part of them. And, I didn't say it like I wasn't being a dick about it. I just was like, I'm not getting into this. I don't care about this. I'm not, whatever's going, there's these things happen at gatherings. It's called cleaning. People get upset, emotions come up. Like there's things that happen, whatever. And I was like, I'm not dealing with this stuff, right? Like it's just whatever it was. And on the way back, we took a bus there. And on the way back, they rented like a little mini bus. And someone came up to me and said, here, we're going to have you sit in front with the driver. And I knew it wasn't because they wanted to, like I was privileged. They just, someone had to sit in front. And they were like, let's stick the American up there. And I was grateful. And they were so whiny and so like just shitty to the bus driver. I ended up buying him like some like lunch and soda, almost like an apology for white people, right? Because they were like so fucking horrible, right? And we get to this restaurant that Chargie's eating upstairs with like people he was traveling with, and all the Europeans are with me. And there's a guy who's like a former coach, a French guy. And there was a big tall guy who was like 6'5" or something, who was he was the preceptor in charge of France. And we were waiting forever for the food because, 200 people, just whatever it is, the amount of people that were traveling with Georgie and 25 European people descended on this Indian restaurant. And they're not known for like, quality service, right? Some of these places. And it was a lot of people to go to this restaurant. It was a nice restaurant, but they were just, they were overwhelmed. The kitchen couldn't produce the food fast enough. And my table got food. We were just sitting there, and the food came to our table. And this guy who was this coach looked like a nice guy, didn't seem like any, just a nice guy. And the guy who's in charge of France comes up and grabs his plate of food and said, "That's my food. I ordered this." And he sat down and ate the guy's food. And like, I wanted to slap him. Like, that just doesn't happen. Like, I don't get this, like, I want to get up and slap this guy. Like, I'm going to slap this motherfucker, right? Just like he was, it was a combination of just how shitty these Europeans were being. Like, but I understood why people didn't like me because of American stuff. Like, I saw how people saw legitimate issues with Americans, American arrogance, American privilege, just because of the lifestyle that we have, the conveniences we have, and the privileges and the attitude and USA. People don't dig that shit, right? And so there's truth to all these things. And if you listen to people and they say the same things over and over again about your country and your people, it's probably true, right? Like, at least there's some truth in it. We're all individuals, and the Democrats are different than the Republicans, and, people in the South are different from people in the North. But there are some tendencies that Americans have that we don't see. And, this is shit that you see in the White Lotus, right? This, these Americans go into these countries and having just an attitude of, like there's an element that we're just better than people because we're Americans. Like, there's just that stuff. Everybody has these things. And China has a history of this kind of stuff, right? Like, they have a reputation, and, everybody I listen to, everybody's seeing, and the rules and laws there, and it all stems from one single point, that they've made God illegal. And that's a fact. Like, you can't run away from that. But for me, it's, I just get a sense of things. And me saying this is the year of chaos and being right. And so this person, starts off the comment by saying, your views shared seem rooted in personal experience, especially when you critique systems. Some of it's personal experience, but you can't have that much personal experience. Like, you also just have to be somebody who gets stuff, And so it says you spend time in India, immerse yourself in the culture, and you speak your experiences. Yeah, I tell stories about that. But when we speak about China without having engaged with Chinese people, I've met Chinese people, and the ones I've met at the ashram were nice, whatever. I didn't have any real long conversations with them. But I've also seen Chinese people who've come here and acted, rudely and whatever it is. Not just rude. There's some other thing that's not rude. Wouldn't be the right word. But I saw this at, like, say, Zion National Park with Chinese tourists and some of the shit that they were doing, and being aggressive and unlikable, right? And again, this isn't all Chinese people, but this is like a tendency. And so the person says, every country contains contradictions, cultures, and layers of experience. It's one thing to critique its government. It's another to pass judgment on entire society without ever stepping into the world. Yeah, I don't do that. I don't know where this person's like, I would never say that this is for every person. I'm pretty clear about that, right? I say that over and over again. We know this with Americans. There's people like me in every country. There's people who are, there's Abhyasis that came from all these countries that did the spiritual thing. There's, people who are truthers in every country. There's people who just don't fit in with their society, don't like their culture, who are just, or misfits or whatever. There's like people like me in every country. And so, that's more my audience than country by country. I'm not looking to, win over India or China or Denmark or, Germany or, any of these, America. It's finding people like me, like that. This is content specifically for people who are like me, right? We're an underrepresented group, right? Let's go back to the comment. Promoting deeper awareness could benefit from a consistent lens, one shaped by curiosity, skepticism, and a willingness to listen. Without that balance, it would come across as a spiritual insight on one hand, and blind generalization similar to mainstream media's oversimplifications on the other. This is a very long comment. For anyone reading this, it's worthy to consider that no country should be redacted to a single story, especially when we haven't experienced it firsthand. Media narratives are often incompetent, and there are always layers to every story. Just a weird generic comment. I would almost say this person's a shill for, the Chinese government has employed people. And I saw this with somebody from Israel. Some guy engaged with me. Like he started off by leaving comments that were favorable. It would happen when I did the 9/11 stuff, and I talked about Israel, as, whatever, their role in that stuff. But then he started to say things that were clearly like he was getting paid or he was voluntarily putting out propaganda for Israel, right? Which is just the worst of the worst. Because, my insights are my insights. They're either right or wrong. Like I'm just bullshitting like everybody else because, it's a vast world we're living in now. And people don't even know their neighbors. Like they don't even know their family, right? So it's like silly to think that anybody could know the total country and the contents and the social structure and the other things. But in terms of this battle between America and China, I'm very critical of the American system. I would say critical, honest. It's a honest critique of the American system, right? The culture, and it's how it's anti-God by being hyper-materialistic, right? You can't be both God and materialistic in the Sajmark system. You need the wing, a bird needs two wings to fly, the material wing and the spiritual wing. It's one of the primary teachings that you can't neglect your material life to be a spiritual person. Run off to a monastery or an ashram or something and neglect your family and these things. I want to get into this with Jesus. Let me do that now. So in that show, the Leftovers, there is a reverend character, kind of an interesting character. And his wife's going to leave him because he's neglecting her, and she was in a coma and came out of it, his whole thing. And spoiler alert. And so she is leaving him, and his his kind of his brother-in-law, the main character, says, your wife's leaving you. And he says, well, Jesus said that so you had to choose him above your family. And, I wasn't aware of that, but I wanted to read these two things. Jesus told his disciples they had to leave their families to follow him. That was the thing I asked. In AI Overview, Genesis said this. Yes, Jesus did tell his disciples they had to leave their families to follow him. In Luke 14:26, he says, if any man come to me and hate not his father and mother and his wife and his children and brethren and his sisters, yet his own life also, he cannot be my disciple. This is a strong statement about priorities and commitment, emphasizing that following Jesus requires putting him above all else, even loved ones. This is a problem. There's an immaturity to some of Jesus's teachings, and again, I don't know how many of these things have been edited, so you can't blame it all on Jesus. But there's other places where he says this. And so there's various places where he says that the disciples have to choose him above his family and leave their families behind. And so now in the Sajmark tradition, you're not supposed to, like I said, this idea of balancing your material world and your material duties and responsibility with your spiritual life, and that you can have both. You can have a job and you can have a family, and also be a spiritual person. You have to run off into the woods, and it's actually kind of abhorred. Like it's something where in the Sajmark tradition, it's unnatural. Like it's unnatural to do that. This is why it's called the natural path. That you have a body and you have a physical responsibilities. You have a human responsibility. You have family. You have to contribute to society. They have these sannyasis that run around and they beg. They walk around, they beg, and they're basically homeless people that are supposed to be spiritual. And that's something that's condemned in the system, that you don't run off and avoid your material life, that you have to contribute something. You have to be a part of society. But in a divorce situation, the only real reason to get divorced is if your spouse is hurting you spiritually. And the only reason to cut off a family member is if somehow they're blocking your spiritual progress, in some way, like they are hurting you spiritually. And anybody in your life that is, negatively affecting you and bringing you down to such an extent on a spiritual level. Any other reason, the things that they're doing to you, you can endure as a spiritual benefit, right? Anything that's not that. Like things that your family does that suck and you don't like it and irritates you can pull out inner poison and help in the cleaning process. So they're actually benefiting you spiritually. So, this idea that you should leave your family behind is not a good idea to put out there. And of course, this was used in the priesthood and things like this, right? In the Christian tradition. Where priests wouldn't marry, these quotes get taken out of context. I don't know what Jesus was saying here. And so you have to have a balanced life. You can always put spirituality and God ahead of these other things in your life, but you look at your family as you're doing your duty to God as being a part of your family. Like your family is a divine assignment, right? And so this is kind of, again, there's an immaturity here, and it's been exploited and misused and misunderstood, like everything else in the Bible, any other spiritual text, that people take these things as excuses, right? And all the, as justification for like leaving their family or doing, whatever it might be. But on the other hand, there's this idea that materialism, if you're supposed to put God in front of your family and leave your family behind in some cases to follow Jesus, then this hyper-materialism that exists in the Christian community in America goes quite against those teachings, right? Because, you're supposed to neglect your material life and follow Jesus, right? Leave your families behind. If you're going to leave your family behind, you certainly leave your fucking addictions and your materialistic bullshit that's less important than your family. But that doesn't exist in America. It's a materialized country. But the opposite is true. So I said, I asked the AI bot, has China banned God in their country? It's more accurate to say the Chinese Communist Party promotes state atheism, significantly restricts religious practices rather than stating that God is outright banned. Here's a breakdown. State atheism, the CPC is officially atheist. This influenced government policies and attitudes towards religion. Control of religious activities. The Chinese Constitution guarantees freedom of religious beliefs, but the government strictly controls religious practices. The only official recognized religious organizations operating under state supervision are permitted to function. This control aims to ensure that religious activities do not challenge the authority of the CPC. And there's more stuff here. Like it's a long list of shit that China does to suppress God in their country, right? The idea that God, because they're atheists. So, a country that is stated atheist. And, I could say America is atheist. Trump's an atheist. Like they don't really believe in God. Or they believe in God, a convenient God, their own personal Jesus. That Jesus endorses all the bullshit that they do, which is not, belief in God. That's an ego's using this idea that God exists only to rubber stamp everything that I'm doing, right? Manifest destiny. But, at least there is freedom of religion and there's spiritual energy in America. There are countries in that people I met from countries that, like for Iran, for example, and this is also true in China, where people who are doing the Sajmarg meditation, had to do it in secret. If they were found out, they would be persecuted in one way or another. And China is a part of that. So, this is the number one issue, like that I would say, that everything stems from that. Like when you take God out of the country and you force atheism on people, and then all the other shit that goes with it. Because if you don't believe in God, then you believe in chaos. again, this is the year of the chaos, right? Because God has a plan. People who believe in God think that God has a plan, right? The people who are science, the scientists can also be people of God, but there's now this divide between people of science and people of God, right? And you can't be both. And because religions suck and they're illogical, it's very easy for scientists to say, well, this is bullshit, or this can't happen, and the supernatural things that are said that are done, and miracles and things like this that scientists can dismiss as these things don't exist. There's no way to prove a soul. They try to weigh bodies and shit, but the soul doesn't have any weight, so it's silly. A soul doesn't exist in any. You can't measure a soul and prove a soul by any scientific mean, or prove God either, right? The idea of love is like a biochemical reaction in your system. Love as a etheric energy can't be proven. God as an etheric being can't be proven. But either way, you have one where there's a divine plan, and there is a consciousness overseeing creation. The other way is just to look at it as like the Big Bang and everything's just random and happening chaotically. And if that's the case, then there's no reason to be moral. There's no reason. And, this is again where all the reports that are out there, and I've seen these from multiple people, and many of them not a part of the official system. There's somebody, it might have been that guy, the Truth Ranger, or the Health Ranger, who I don't really, he's not great, but wrote something up about having to buy organic food from China and Chinese people and the government there. And it's a nightmare. And they lie and they cheat and they steal. And, this is something I've heard over and over again for people who've had personal experiences in business and with these things. And why wouldn't they? Because they don't believe in God. There's no plan. If it's chaotic, then you might as well do whatever the fuck you want. There's no morals. There's no ethics. There's no overseeing guiding principle. It's just whoever wins, right? Win at any cost. And so when your country is, is stated as being atheist, is the pathway to power, the pathway to, the inside group, the controlling group, then this is the kind of country you're going to have, the kind of country that everybody reports about. And so, I've never been there, so yeah, well, so what? Going there wouldn't change my, interacting with some nice Chinese people, yeah, of course, you'd have that experience. But the overall country, everything that I'm saying here is what people report. And so, atheism is basically saying there's no order or no rules. It's chaotic. And when there's chaos and you're only going to live now, you're going to die. So might as well enjoy yourself and have whatever. There's no reason to suffer and sacrifice for some afterlife or some, soul that doesn't exist, right? And, the way that the Communist Party, the Chinese have treated the Tibetans and these things, the stuff that's happened there. And so, it's there. Are they more evil than America? Well, it's a different form of evil, right? And there's all these countries have, the bigger the country, the more powerful the country, the more evil they can inflict on their own people and the people of the world. And so materialism is evil. It goes against God's will. And whatever the fuck they're doing in China, the communism and the atheism and the way that they're conducting themselves, and they abuse their own people. They keep their currency down. This is fact. There's cheap Chinese goods is the fucking evidence, right? That they keep the currency down and they have slave labor and they have suicide nets. And those are real things that are happening there, right? They forced people to play video games until they died. They wouldn't let them sleep. They kept them up for 48 hours. And people died from playing too much video games. They mistreat their people there. People are mistreated all over the world. But some of these things are, undeniable, because the reason we have cheap shit from China is because they pay their people almost nothing. It's slave labor. They're worthwhile people in every country. And, it's better to be a worthwhile person here in America, although being a spiritual person in any country in the West is difficult. Because it's just not, it's hard to be spiritual in a hedonistic, material-based country. But I think it's probably worse being in China. Trying to be a spiritual person, someone who wants to connect to God there, because there's just no energy. There's no holy places. Everything's going to be, I mean, it's bad what they've done there. And it's a governmental issue, but it's also, the people that generated that government. And communism is, no worse than capitalism, but they're different forms of evil, and all these things take away people from what their soul's path or their soul purpose is. Finding your soul's path and your soul's purpose in both China and America is difficult, because America, you have too many, hedonistic lures of sensory stimulation and things that pull you away from finding your soul's path and, pleasure and things like this. In China, they just make it fucking out illegal, and, you're living in fear, and you have to suppress your tendencies, and you can't be who you are or who you want to become, because it goes against the whole, the whole governmental structure, the heavy-handed governmental structure there, right? Americans are treated badly in a different way because, again, the hyper-materialism here and the way that they exploit people's weaknesses and, just all of it, taking people in the wrong direction. Like, we're getting weaker and more entitled, and it's bad for people. The capitalist system, the world economic system, is bad for people. In China, they literally enslave their people, and they're, making them live horrible lives so they can be cogs in the wheel of a dysfunctional, evil fucking system, in which they, the system is God to them, and the individual has to sacrifice themselves for the greater good, which is the same thing in America. Like, every system's like this. The people that control it, whether it's a religion or whatever these number of things, expect you to sacrifice your own, personal, whatever it is, for the greater good. And the greater good is the evil of the cult that is the system, right? And that's what Trump expects, right? That Trump expects you to sacrifice yourself and pledge loyalty and fealty to him so that you can get exemptions from his bullshit laws, right? And these countries that are crushing individuality, that's the Communist Party and the Communist way, right? The individual sacrifices for the greater good of the state. And it's soulless, and people are miserable there, and then also there's no God. And so like, I'm being too hard on China. Like, it's just silly shit. Like, people just write stupid shit, right? Like, I'm just bullshitting here, but I'm connected to God in whatever way I am, and, my abilities to recognize patterns and things, it's not, some of it's based in experience, of course, living a life of being around people and systems and things like that, but some of it's just intuitive. And I'm not professing any of this stuff is factual or whatever. Like, I'm not going to get every nuance or every detail, and I can't speak to all the the idiosyncratic, these little variations of Chinese culture or Indian culture, and it's a vast world out there. You can't know all of it. Like, you just can't. Like I said, people don't even know their own spouses. They don't even know their family members. People have these secret ideas and lives, and how many people have been shocked by a loved one that you were like, I never thought that person would do something like that, right? Like, they have something inside of them you never even knew, right? Like, there's, people don't know their own kids, or kids come out as gay, or like, and they're like, what's that? What's that, right? Like, things happen, or couples marry and one of them's gay, and then 20 years later the person comes out and the person's married to him had no idea, right? And so, there was a story. Let me just end with this, and we'll get back to the other stuff here. So when I was in graduate school, it was a very new age school, but there was one guy who was like, very traditional. These were all people who had counseling jobs, but they also would work at this college. It is a master's degree in counseling. So they had their own counseling profession, and then they would also teach at this school for a little extra money. And this one guy was more traditional. The other people were, most of the other people were very new agey, very liberal, this kind of thing. It was in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Some of them weren't, but this one guy wasn't, for sure. And this isn't the story, but there was a dude who was into martial arts, and I think it was Aikido or something. And we were supposed to do a research project. This was, the course was research. And the guy comes in a gi with a bow and arrow and shoots the arrow into a target. And that was his research project. I shit you not. Like, this is a fucking master's degree in counseling. And the teacher's like, yeah, that's not what it's going for. Like, it was supposed to be an actual, like, paper or something, something that was substantial. It could be a little bit, your own experience, but not like fucking. It was weird. Like I was like, oh my god, this is so getting so fucking. And this is Santa Fe, New Mexico. It's known for this stuff, right? But this guy taught a class called Addictions, and in this class we had to go to an AA meeting, and we also had to go to an Al-Anon meeting, which was quite interesting because it was for me. I went to this meeting. I was the only guy there, and it was like the living room scene from the Jerry Maguire movie where he's coming in and all these divorced women are bitching about men, and he's got to come in there at the end of the movie and profess his love for this girl and win her over with these bitter women who are telling every or saying that you should never fucking men can't be trusted, this thing. And so anyway, I went to this Al-Anon meeting. It was all women and many of them liberal and whatever. I was like, I was really uncomfortable 2 hours or whatever it was, and just a lot of mostly bitching about men. But anyways, he was telling a story where he was dealing with an alcoholic and his wife in counseling. The professor was, and the woman comes in, and the guy is shit-faced, and it's like 2:00 in the afternoon, and he's reeking like alcohol, whatever, gin or whatever. The guy can smell it, right? He staggers into the office, and the wife's like, oh my God, my husband's doing so well. He's been sober now for 6 months, and he's just the most wonderful, and it's just our relationship's so much better. And the guy's like, she's so fucking convincing that he goes out and goes, excuse me, and he goes gets a colleague, so one of his other fellow, whatever it was, counselors and the therapists in the agency, and he brings the guy in and he says, to the guy, is he drunk? He says beforehand because he doesn't say it to their face, but, and the guy comes in, it's like, and the guy comes in for a second, they go out together, he goes, yeah, of course he's drunk, right? You can smell it. But she was so convinced in her denial that he was like, am I crazy? Like, is she crazy or am I crazy? This kind of thing, right? But here's a wife who's been living with her alcoholic husband, and she's so fucking warped in her, she's changed her perception of reality so much, the guy's shit-faced right in front of her, and she's denying it. And so, people just don't even know their own spouses, their own whatever. So, someone has to be gifted and, has to have pattern recognition and, has to look at these things. And we live in a world of deception. And so, to be able to do what I do here, there has to be something that, allows truth to flow through me in some way where, information comes through me. And I trust in that, but I don't take any of it seriously because, it's all bullshit, right? Like this is all, none of this stuff's going to make a difference. What's going to play out between America and China is going to play out. And it's two fucking evil entities going at each other. And both systems are evil. They go against God's will. They're both demonic. It's the battle of two quite different demons. And for battle of power and whatever it is over the world. And if China is in charge of the world, things are going to get a lot worse. I mean, it's, in terms of, it's going to be worse. Like, it's just life for people in the world is going to be worse. If China becomes the dominant country, and that's the, what people will be gravitating to, right? It'll be a soulless, lack of divinity that's going to pervade the world. Not that America is good or a beacon of spirituality, it certainly isn't. Like, America has to go for people to evolve. Like I said over and over again, people won't choose to change as long as there's all these distractions and comforts and things. They won't choose their spiritual side. And so there has to be suffering, mass suffering that's brought to you by poor choices. And whatever way this plays out, and I don't know how it's going to play out, there's going to be fucking difficulties and, our lifestyles are going to change dramatically. All right, let's get back into this stuff here. So I just want to bring this back before we do that to this Ukrainian woman now. She was a girl in her 20s when I saw her in India some 10 years ago or whatever it was. Back when Master Charji was alive. He died in 2014, so over 10 years ago. And so, I've seen this over and over again. There are people who gravitate to spirituality and get it. Like, whatever system they're using, they form a relationship with God. And some systems are better than others. And, in any system, in a religion, there's spiritual people. And, in any kind of, structured movement, there's a way people can connect to God because God's there wanting to be connected with, right? God's there. We just have to choose it. Like God's willing, but are we, right? So, there's these things. But like I said, this young woman was wanting to marry into the Indian culture and be a part of this, not only Saj Marg forever, because married into a Saj Marg family. And things didn't work out for her. And now she's doing some weird bullshit Ukrainian, spiritual thing, service, energy work, whatever it is, right? And, I've seen this over and over again. So did you believe what you were, like people say they believe in things, but that's why there's divorce. They profess their loves for somebody and then, they hate the person, right? I mean, how many divorces end in hatred? Start off in love and end in hatred. So, human beings are just not able to stick to things, or they're not able to, see what's good or what's bad and differentiate. And, they'll get tattoos of people's names and then have to erase them and, shit like that, right? Make bold proclamations, but don't stick with things. Things don't last. And I see this over and over again. And this is what we're seeing here. People go to war over beliefs, but they don't even believe in their own beliefs, right? Their beliefs are very transitory. And whatever proclamations they make and vows and, and things that they say they love, it's only for the time being. Everything is, people will drop you like, this is how life is right now. People can't be consistent, and it just takes some small little thing oftentimes to destabilize families, destabilize countries, destabilize the world. And, people don't believe in their own systems. And there's a self-destructive nature to human beings right now. And so this is the collective path we're on. And this, war between China and America, some of the stuff is just whimsical by Trump and wanting to prove himself. It's a lot of, things that he's doing and whatever his handlers are telling him and whatever Chinese plans are there. But there's a divine aspect to all this stuff, right? Let me go to this thing with Trump saying fights, because that'll segue into this. Let's go to that. So the video I just put up this morning, was just made public this morning, I talked about how Friday night, my wife and I had very restless nights, and I'm getting a lot of comments. I'll read some of them probably for the start of my next video. Like a lot of people went through restlessness on Friday night, and so there's that. But I was going to cover it here because it's more about this stuff. So this video came up last night. I meant to put this like first, right? But I didn't, so I'm, here it is.
Well, I moved out of the way for my...
How about you move over here now? You go further. Okay, that's good, thank you.
Hello, Mr. President.
Hello, everybody. How are you? How are you, Jeff? So we're going to the fight, and we have lots of fights going around the world.
We're going to fight, and we have lots of fights going around the world. Like, that's a stunning statement.
And I think we have a lot of good news coming soon about some of those fights. And we'll see how it goes. But it's been an interesting weekend. I think we have some pretty good news coming on some of the conflicts.
So we're fighting wars all over the world. That's what he's saying. There's wars being fought, economic and otherwise. And he's now negotiating with Iran, which is a whole thing, right? Which no matter what, Iran's going to get screwed over because we fucked Iran over with Operation Warp Speed 60 years ago when the CIA, not Warp Speed, Operation Ajax, not these stupid operations like little fucking kid shit, right? But, he just stirred a bunch of shit up. This is chaotic, right? And he's fighting all these fights, and it's making the other people concede. Everything that Trump's doing is that he thinks he can make people say uncle, not people, countries. That he will bully these countries into agreeing to do what America wants to do, and he'll be able to bully some of them for some period of time. But there's going to be fuck America along with that. Like they might knuckle under to him. But you don't like it when you have to knuckle under to somebody who steals from you or, falsely accuses you of fucking being a thief and a piece of shit for deals that benefit for deals that have benefited America, and then he squeezes you to make a better deal. there's going to be a fuck you America. So there's going to be a backlash in terms of attitude towards America, even to the ones who cry uncle and knuckle under. We'll get back into this in a moment.
The readout on the Iran talks, sir?
I think they're going okay.
What was your what
well, I
did
can't
Mr. Whitcock tell you about?
because it doesn't. Nothing matters until you get it done. So I don't like talking about it, but it's going okay. The Iran situation is going pretty good.
Are there other talks that are going well, sir?
I think.
Are there other talks that are going well?
I think. You think it's going well?
In addition to the Iran
There
talks?
are other talks going well. I think Ukraine, Russia might be going okay, and you're going to be finding out.
So, Trump always exaggerates, right? Trump never says, like, oh, we're doing okay. He's always saying we're doing the best. So if he's saying it's okay, that means they're in the toilet, right? Like, it's just,
Pretty soon, there's a point at which you just have to either put up or shut up, and we'll see what happens. But I think it's going fine. I think we have the tariffs in very good shape. We got a lot of things going, don't we? When you think about
a lot of wars. Yeah, you do. You did a bunch of shit, like, right off the bat, and, it wasn't a good idea. You should have taken these problems on one at a time. And so, like, you've just, it looks like you don't know what the fuck you're doing, which because you don't, right? And this is destabilizing the world economy and Wall Street. Nobody thinks you have a plan here, which I'll get into because I want to get into the whole 5D chess thing here in a moment.
We got a lot of things going.
Yeah, I was going to say the core inflation's dropping. Americans have more money.
Inflation's dropping. Americans have more money, and the country has more money.
Okay, so that's a pro-Trump guy because Americans don't feel that way. The same way Joe Biden said this is a great economy, when America said, no, this is not a great economy. People are, like, not happy about what's going on, and they, other than the Trumpers who are just, doe-eyed. Now let's get into, we'll get into the fake Christian Barbie truther in a second here.
We've been making $2 and $3 billion a day the last couple of weeks. We didn't make that ever. And we're making a lot of money. And then to be nice, I lowered the tariffs on everybody.
To be nice. You're doing things just to be nice? Like, that shows he doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. Like, he did it because the bond market was collapsing and, it was getting to the point where it's going to be recession. Like, all the powerful people came out and said, you got to fucking knock this shit off. It's going the wrong way. And he listened to them and the bond market. And so it wasn't to be nice. Like,
we didn't make that ever. And we're making a lot of money. And then to be nice, I lowered the tariffs on everybody. But we've been making a lot of money, and it's always been the other way around. Other countries, in particular China, was making a lot of money.
It's interesting. I was with you on the campaign this time last year, and Americans were telling me they weren't planning to take a summer vacation because of inflation, gas prices, airline tickets. It's a different scenario now. What's your message to the American family when they...
Okay, so he's got all these pro-Trump reporters on the fucking thing now, right? So, like, just lobbying them fucking questions with, you're doing such a great job. Like, this is, which is smart of Trump. I don't begrudge him that because CNN and MSNBC sucks. But these guys, Trump doesn't have anybody telling him what a piece of shit he is, right? Unless he watches CNN and MSNBC, which he used to, because he likes that shit for some reason. But, like, other than that, he doesn't have people around him and media asking him real questions. And he's got rid of this thing called fake news, but he's brought in, like, faker news, right? People who are just yes men. And so let's go to Caroline Levitt. I got a bigger point to make here. Okay, so this is Kristi Noem. Rachel Maddow did a good hit job, which sucks, because Rachel Maddow sucks. And if Rachel Maddow can do you up, then you really suck. About her putting on these different costumes, and I covered it in my last video. And then YouTube recommended this. This is where she's in this prison in Venezuela. And this shows you, I want to go to the Barbie Truther because I want to go cover that last. Because I have one more final point to make before I wrap this video up. But she...
Here at CCOT today and visiting this facility. And first of all, I want to thank El Salvador and their president for their partnership with the United States of America.
So they've built these mega prisons, for-profit prisons in El Salvador. And America's paying to put these people, they're paying tax dollars to put people away. And she does these promotional videos where she gets threatening and she dresses up. She's got her fucking hat on, right? Doesn't she look like her name should be like Bambi? And she's like a stripper or a prostitute, like before. Like she used to be a stripper and a prostitute, but now she's, or one or both, or both. Usually they're both, right? And then she has been reformed in some way, and she got, you know, I don't know, an education. She paid for an education with her stripper money. And then she, you know, has reformed and turned Republican, and now she does these promotional things here.
To bring our terrorists here and to incarcerate them and have consequences.
To bring our terrorists here and incarcerate them. So they're not terrorists, they're criminals. And the only people from El Salvador, not all of our terrorists go here. You're not taking people who are terrorists who are U.S. citizens and or from other countries to an El Salvadorian prison, are you? Like, listen to what she just said there.
Thank El Salvador and their president for their partnership with the United States of America to bring our terrorists here and to incarcerate them and have consequences for the violence that they have perpetuated in our communities. I also want everybody to know, if you come to our country illegally, this is one of the consequences you could face.
Okay, so that's a big statement. First of all, the people who are coming to this country illegally are poor. And maybe some of them are criminals, but they're all probably poor. If they're successful criminals, they're doing well in their own country, right? And so they're poor criminals, bad criminals, whatever, ones who can't make it, you know, whatever it is, right? There are going to be some degenerates coming over the border because that's what happens. But there's a lot of poor people. And those poor people are suffering from oftentimes death, you know, they're facing death and misery in their own country that America can't duplicate. And so no matter what she says, they're not going to listen to her. They probably don't speak English, and they don't have access to this. And so this is something she's saying to her audience. Hey, this is some of the consequences if you come here. But listen to that again, because there's something else that's important.
The violence that they have perpetuated in our communities. I also want everybody to know, if you come to our country illegally, this is one of the consequences you could face.
Now, only if they're criminals and they're from El Salvador, right? And so she's undercutting any kind of credibility in Trump's message and her message by saying, threatening this to all the people. Just because you come to America illegally doesn't mean you're going to be imprisoned in El Salvador, right? But they have locked up people that don't deserve to be locked up. This is only for people who are convicted criminals in El Salvador. I mean, it shouldn't be people who came to America illegally, even from El Salvador, go straight to prison, even if they haven't committed any crimes. But that's happened. And they don't want to take the person back. They've locked people up that don't deserve to be locked up there with these guys' shaved heads and, you know, tattoos and these alleged gang members. And she's threatening like all these people who aren't listening. This is just bravado for her fan base. But this shows you everything that's wrong with the Trump fucking posturing. You know, this wannabe fucking model who wanted to be vice president, but she wrote a book where she glorified putting down one of her dogs in a way that was just, you know, trying to make herself look good and to the red meat eating Americas, the right wing people, but just made her look stupid and bad to everybody else. And then Trump couldn't make her VP, but he put her in charge of Homeland Security, and she goes around putting on all these costumes and doing all this performative bullshit and macho. This is what happens when you come to our country illegally. But the reality is, even with Trump doing what he's doing, they're fighting a losing battle because it's too many people. And they're barely scratching the surface. But they just want to make you feel like they're on it with this fucking bullshit, like 8th grade rhetoric here.
First of all, do not come to our country illegally. You will be removed and you will be prosecuted. But know that this facility is one of the tools in our toolkit that we will use if you commit crimes against the American people.
So, just fucking bullshit thing, right? I'm surprised Rachel Maddow didn't show this video when she showed all these costumes, because it's a fucking, this is the Abu Ghraib, that those prisoners were in there. They put hoods on them. Like, it's just uncool to do this shit, right? Trying to look like a tough guy. I mean, just everything about this. And just pathetic. And this shows you they're just, this undercuts Trump in various ways. But it's a kind of bravado and stuff. You say, oh, she's so good looking. Like, the That's Trump's thing, right? People who look good on camera. But it's just icky. It's fucking icky. And so that's the first part. Here's the more important one.
Thanks, Caroline. President Trump has said China wants to make a deal on tariffs. The president says he has a great relationship with Chinese President Xi. He's willing to speak with him directly. Why doesn't the president just pick up the phone and get this ball going?
All of the things the president just said are true. The president...
Why you wouldn't have to say that if he was a truth teller.
As I said from the podium just a few days ago when I was up here, would be gracious if China intends to make a deal with the United States. If China continues to retaliate, it's not good for China. The United States of America is the strongest, best economy in the world, as evidenced by the more than 75 countries who have called the administration immediately to cut good deals. So the president wants to do it.
Okay, so the other countries aren't going to exclude China. It isn't like, this is... what I was going to say and what I was going to do the voiceover start off with. When you're in a situation where you have to choose between two people you love or like, relatives that don't get along with your spouse and, these types of things, right? Kids and stuff and marriages where there's, blended families, people have to make choices. They end up having to make choices between loved ones, make choices between, in some case, enemies, like, in terms of their job and all these things, where you have to make choices that there's two people or entity or group or corporation or whatever it is, bosses, that are pulling you in two different directions. People who are opposed, and you have to make a choice. Like they're saying, all these people have to make a choice between China and America. I mean, if he's saying that in terms of the deals he's making with these countries, if that's what this is on the table here. But certainly he's making all these countries choose, using these tariffs, and then saying he wants to renegotiate these things, and they all have the choice to make. It's all the ball's in their court. Trump applies leverage, which I'll get into at the end, because that's the key to this thing. Trump has like one skill in the art of the deal. And so, they're making this a possible... it's either a referendum on the American economy, which it won't last because, like I said, he's pissing everybody off. But she's not acknowledging that China could fuck us over. We owe them money. We've borrowed money from China. They hold a lot of dollars that they keep in dollars as as an asset, which they could dump onto the world market and devalue the fuck out of the dollar. They have like at least $1 trillion, if not more, trillions of dollars they could just dump and destroy the value of the dollar, which would, they could cripple the American economy. China can. And there was all this cheap shit we're getting from them that we can't get from other places. And so, that will hurt the American consumer. It's going to drive up prices because demand is going to go up. Supply is going to go down. And so she's not acknowledging that China has their own leverage here, right? Like China also has leverage. And so it's whatever Trump might think let's skip into this thing. I'll go back to the leverage part.
What's right for the American people. He wants to see fair trade practices around the globe, and that's his intention and his goal.
So is he waiting for China to make the first move here?
I'm not going to comment on communications that are happening or may not be happening, or either way.
Well, I don't know. She's so doe-eyed and like some girl who's fresh out of college, and she hasn't realized it's all bullshit yet, right? Like maybe she has, but she just comes out like, like that Reese Witherspoon from character from Election, some doe-eyed Republican girl just believes in the Republican causes and has no idea there's any other point of view. And just this cult-like fucking persona, there's that all of it, right? And you see the same thing from Kristi Noem, but she's much older, and all of it. This is some fake shit that they do. It's totally fucking fake, right? This is just political theater.
We'll leave it to our national security team to get these discussions underway. And as always, in the effort of transparency, we will provide updates moving forward. But the president has made it very clear he's open to a deal with China.
Why is he optimistic that China's going to make a deal or wants to make a deal?
This is the key one here.
They're not talking. Where's that optimism come
He's
from?
optimistic.
Hey.
Sean.
What?
Why would any of our allies work with us to isolate China in a trade war if we're treating friend and foe alike?
You'll have to talk to our allies who are reaching out to us. The phones are ringing off of the hooks. They've made it.
They're ringing off the hook. I can tell you. There's phones. There's like a bunch of phones we put in, and each phone goes to one of the countries. Like phone says France, and one phone says Sri Lanka, and they're always fucking ringing. Like you go in the room, and every one of these phones is ringing constantly. No one's answering it because fucking this doesn't exist. But these phones, they're ringing. They're fucking ringing a lot.
Very clear. They need the United States of America. They need our markets. They need our consumer base. You saw Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in the Oval Office with the president saying
okay, so any kind of, look, when you're in a negotiation, right? So Trump has made it clear that these tariffs are just leverage points that he's using because he wants fair trade. And so there is a opening offer, which is the Trump tariffs that these countries have to now pay. And so these countries have the option of retaliating like China has done, or talking to Trump and saying, all right, what do you want that we could make make a deal on this thing and get his next, give him a counter offer or something, right? Or even talk to him about it. Like there's lots of people who are calling, like Apple, for example, that backed Trump and is a huge company that now has gotten exemptions. There's all these people who've gotten exemptions that have called Trump up and said, we're like, there's this thing that she says here. Hopefully I can find that. I probably can because it's let me see if I can find that here before we finish this one up. Okay, so I was looking for this video clip. I couldn't find it. I got lost doing other shit. I forgot what it's looking for, but I think it was Karen Levin. It was a different maybe news report. I don't know what it is. But they gave Apple and these tech companies exemptions from the tariffs until they build companies, right, in America. That's the idea. She says, well, they're going to build companies as soon as possible. But as soon as possible could be 20 years, right, whatever it is. So there's just that. Let's get back into this thing.
You'll have to talk to our allies who are reaching out to us. The phones are ringing off of the hooks. They've made it very clear they need the United States of America. They need our markets. They need our consumer base. You saw Prime Minister...
Just the way she talks, like it's just like, are you like really fucking this brain dead kind of thing? Are you just, almost like she's a, AI creation robot, right?
Benjamin Netanyahu in the Oval Office with the president saying that he was going to bring down all of their monetary tariffs and their non-monetary tariff trade barriers as well. We've heard from South Korea. We've heard from Japan.
Okay, of course, Israel is a totally different thing because Trump's given Israel everything they want. And Netanyahu has said he's the greatest friend Israel's ever had. And so the tariffs thing, that's just a bullshit thing, right? We're giving them billions of dollars every year. They're winning the trade. They're winning the trade war because we give them just fucking money. We give them straight up money, right? It's not even about a trade war with Israel.
The president has spoken to Vietnam. We have Italy coming to the White House next week. There's a reason for that, Sean, and it's because they need the United States of America.
Yeah, look at how happy she is. Oh yeah, they need the United States.
Our business model and our markets to survive, and the president is using that leverage to our advantage. Michael.
Leverage to our advantage. It's the leverage, and that's what we're going to cover here. That's going to finish this up.
Caroline, two-part question. China, Beijing says it will simply ignore any further tariff escalations from the U.S. Does President Trump see this as China backing down? And as a follow-up to that, what do you say to people like Shark Tank's Kevin O'Leary who say, you guys simply haven't tariffed China enough?
Look, the tariff rate on China remains where it was yesterday, at the 145% level. The president made it very clear when the United States is punched, he will punch back harder. And he hopes to make a deal that benefits the American worker and our companies that have been ripped off for far too long. And he's finally taking bold and courageous action to do that. Taking on China is, in the terms of trade and...
Take it on China, take it up to... Take it on China, taking on China.
Action to do that. Taking on China is, in the terms of trade and tariffs, is something that both Democrats and Republicans alike have spoken about for decades. President Trump is finally doing it.
Okay. He's finally doing it.
We're now just a little more than 3.5 hours away from a big...
Okay, so this is kind of important. It's coming at the end of this video. I think I might be putting all this stuff in the Journey series as well. I don't know. But it's kind of important in understanding. I want to get into the leverage stuff with Trump. But let's just recap something. With Trump saying, taking on all these fights. And so a lot of people dislike Israel and are upset by the way America backs Israel. I've been talking about the Muslim countries, but some of these other countries, there's some element of not happy with that relationship and what's being done to the people of the Palestinian people. And there's people all over the world that are upset by this, and people in Israel, Jewish people that are upset by the way the Palestinian people have been treated. Like, so even within their own country, there's issues with this, certainly in America and this other stuff. But the Middle East and this battle between Israel and the rest of the Middle East, and the Middle East stuff itself with the battle between the Shia and the Sunnis, like, that's chaotic. But to add to that, there's Iran. And America fucked Iran over with Operation Ajax when they took out the leader Mossadegh. I've talked about that. We all are, we're all complicit in that. And I know these Iranian people, and I talked to these Iranian people. One guy I was really close to. I talked to him quite a bit. And this guy was a presenter. He's just a really nice guy. And he presented like he was like I want to say like one of those public speakers that, inspirational speaker. And he did these things, and he was running a good business out of India. And he was, they were telling me that they couldn't meditate in Iran, and I always felt bad because they were nice to Americans. Like I knew a lot of these Iranians, and they didn't hold any grudges towards America, and we fucked their country over completely. Of course, I think they were mature enough to understand that, that wasn't me or other Americans there. But, they were living suffering lives because they were aware of the Operation Ajax and what happened with Mossadegh. These are people who don't like the current regime there. They're suffering from the regime that America put in by putting in the Shah of Iran, who was a bloodthirsty, fucking horrible leader. All these things that people know about. And so he's taken on the Israel thing. He's taken on Iran, right? And then this stuff with Russia, which is another big thing, and the war with the Ukraine, which fell into his lap, which isn't his fault, but something happened under Biden, but also, Trump blowing the election and all the stuff that happened with that brought about the Biden presidency. But he's taken on that. And then he's taken on China, which is, the inevitable fight between America and China economically, and the inevitable war, whatever's going on that. And that's all he's taken on. He's taken on all these things. But aside with that, he's taken on Denmark and wants to steal fucking Greenland from them. He wants to own the Panama Canal again, change the fucking Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America, like all this other shit that he's doing, right? On top of all these things. And he's started bad-mouthing our allies, calling them liars and cheats and how they're screwing us over and they're fucking horrible people. And that's Canada, like fucking Canada. No one thought we would be at war with Canada, right? And then to some extent, Mexico was more understandable, but still, but they're both allies, right? And then there's Europe, which he's gone after. So Trump is, this is the idea of chaos. And you think the guy has a plan, but he doesn't. Like, you don't think he has a plan, but the Trumpers think he has a plan. This idea of third-dimensional chess or fifth-dimensional chess or millionth-dimensional chess, when you play chess, when I first started playing chess, I was playing against, like, some old computer game that was on my old fucking PC years and years ago. And I was talking to this guy who was an Abiasi, he worked at MIT as a rocket scientist, but very similar to me. Like, we grew up we're basically the same age. And we talked quite a bit. Like, he was practicing Sajmarg, and one of the few people I could relate to. And he was like I don't want to call him a master level chess player, but around, someone who read lots of books on chess and understood the strategy. And he was like, well, those early computer games, it's, on level 1, the beginner level, the computer sees one move ahead. And then the second level, it sees 2 moves ahead. The third level, it seems 3 moves ahead. And the fourth level, so it's 4 moves ahead. Then the fifth level was 5 moves ahead. And that's as much as it goes. And so if you can see more than 5 moves ahead, based in understanding all the strategies, you have your opening chess move, and then there's all these various strategies from there. And the computer knows all these things. This is years ago. Now, of course, AI has all that stuff and more, right? And so it's impossible for these grandmasters to beat a really qualified AI, real good AI program, or some of these computer programs, because they know all the strategies and they know all the moves, and they can calculate your move, and they can see what you're going to do and what they're going to do in these things, right? And so really, it's who sees moves ahead, right? And Trump doesn't see any moves ahead because he's not thoughtful. Like, I've made this case very clear about understanding his personality type. He's very reactive, and he gives his, he expects his people. Remember, he says, I always hire great people, these good people, great people. He expects his people to figure it out. Like, he says, all right, let's go do something in Yemen, that whole Yemen debacle. And he goes, go handle it. Like, go, you guys deal with it. Like, Trump isn't a planner and he isn't a strategist. And he just comes up with a problem, and then he comes up with the first solution. And his negotiation skills, his art of the deal with Caroline Levitt saying, is leverage. And what he thinks is the American economy is the best economy, which it is, and that all these people enjoy selling to the large American market of of hedonistic consumers that buy a lot of shit, right? And so Americans buy more resources, more things from other countries than any other country. So people sell their shit here, and they need to sell their shit here. If they don't sell it here, they're going out of business. So that's the leverage that Trump has, and particularly with China. Like, they're going to suffer greatly economically in terms of their business and their, maybe even their currencies and these things, if they can't sell their shit to Americans, right? So that's the leverage. So tariffs are put up there, high-level tariffs, and then they have to come in and renegotiate. And Trump is in the power position because he also holds all the leverage, unless they have something on America, which they usually don't. And so Trump has always, benefited from these leverage deals. I talked about how he would screw over small businesses and vendors by negotiating a deal with them, and then when they expected to get paid, he'd say, no, we're going to renegotiate the deal. And they had no choice because he had better lawyers, he was in a better position, and they had to take whatever crumbs he was going to give them. And, this happens over and over again. Trump learned to bully people when he was in the power position, had more leverage. And he feels like he's in that position because he is the gatekeeper to the American economy. But that's just one move ahead. And so what Trump is saying over and over again, they can't do anything but cave to our tariffs. And maybe that's the case to some extent. But like I said before, they were like, well, this guy's not playing by the rules. He's bullying us, which nobody fucking likes. They might feel like they're bullied by America quite often. America gives money and these things, all the USAID, which they're not doing anymore. A lot of these monies that, were going out there. So this is ways they would buy people and buy politicians and, get favorable deals. So, there's a lot here, right? But the bottom line is, if Trump is wrong and these countries don't cave to America, or cave to America in the short term and then develop a long-term strategy to go around America or go around the, whatever it is, right? Whatever they figure out, Trump has no answer for it. And especially with China, because China can fuck America. China has leverage of their own. And maybe China has leverage that we don't know about. And so they probably do. And so, first of all, they can dump the dollar. Second, they can, they can call in these loans. I mean, they can cripple the American economy. And then they can just withhold their goods and not pay the tariffs, or just allow the tariffs, the costs to go up. And so that there are no longer cheap Chinese goods that are here. And that Americans will then see hyper raising of prices, which are going to blame on Trump. And then they have the leverage that they have better control over their people than Trump has over his population. And so China has a lot here, like I said earlier. And so what if they say, fuck you? Like, what if they call Trump's bluff? Which he's not expecting, but he's fighting all these fucking wars. He's all spread out thin all over the place, and he's putting America in a very vulnerable position where we could be left completely alone, where everyone's like, fuck you, right? Like, what happens when he calls for NATO to help him fight China, and all the NATO countries say, hey, we're going to fuck you. You weren't here for us in the Ukraine, and, you fucked us over on tariffs, and you called us thieves and liars. I mean, who knows how this is going to play out? And Trump certainly doesn't, because Trump is, he's just somebody who doesn't do deep research. He doesn't think things out. and he knows simplistic, leverage-based negotiations where he can bully the person into capitulating. And if that doesn't work, he doesn't have a backup plan. He clearly doesn't. And so he's not playing 5D chess. He doesn't see more than one move ahead. And that's fucked, right? Consider he's doing all these things at once, and all of it's predicated on bullying people with the American economy and access to it, which, if they do have to capitulate, they're going to do it with the bitter taste in their mouth. They're not going to be into it, right? So this is where we're at right now with Trump and the rest of this fucking shit that's happening. And so this isn't going to go all Trump's way, even temporarily. I mean, he might call some of these deals good deals just to call them good deals or whatever happens here to say there's some success. But the American people decide based in the prices of what they buy whether it's a success or not. Joe Biden called his economy a success. And people are like, no, we're paying more for groceries. Fuck you, right? There are a lot of people who are echoing Joe Biden's successful economy talking points, like in the media. But the American people are like, yeah, don't tell us it's successful. We're paying 4 times what we used to pay for certain things or whatever, right? And so it's going to come down to that kind of shit. But also that whatever goodwill there was between America and these other countries, Trump's used all that shit up. Like, there's things that he's used up here. Like you have in some video game where you have these, pouches of little fucking coins or shit that you could use to, you're using up your lives, you're using up your, all your assets, to push for something. And, Trump's doing this out of a big ego and to show he's a better president and he's better than Biden and all these things. He doesn't take responsibility when he fails either, so there's no risk for him. He'll just blame it on other people. Plus, he's at the end of his rope. So, it's all fucking, it's really fucked right now. And really, it comes down to what China's going to do and what does China want. And, like Fareed Zakaria was saying, there's the hardliners in China, which there have to be, that have wanted to be able to, detangle this relationship with America because, they're at war with America. And they have this, this dysfunctional marriage. And, they can live without it. And then they all of a sudden, they have the leverage. And if Trump ends up having a cave to China, publicly, if China beats him on this, then that's it for America. America's no longer number one. If Trump has to bow down to China because he fucking overplayed his hand, then that's it. Like, it's just like when the American government said you can't go to church because of COVID, because scientists say you can't go to church. That meant that we have the religion of science is dominating over Christianity because that's, what's just been said. Like, that's, that was the moment there was this shift. And if China wins this thing, and they almost certainly will, and Trump is spread too thin on all these things. So there's a lot to consider here. I got a bunch of follow-up stuff from this, not specifically about the terrorists, but stuff to do with Israel and some of these other things, and all of it, right? This is chaos, and Trump is a chaos agent, and chaos is, the opposite of order, which is the divine plan, right? You cling to God, you cling to the divinity, the divine plan and divine laws and rules, you obey them, and your system is sustainable. But then when you do this chaotic bullshit, then it's just a mess. And it's just random and things are happening because you've just, there's no order to your whatever you're doing. And Trump is really an impulsive person, and his, these things are showing. And he clearly doesn't have a plan, and people think he does. They're going to have a rude fucking awakening because shit's going to go south, and Trump doesn't have a backup move. Like, he's got this one move. He uses leverage, and that's it. Like, once that's gone, he's got nothing else. Anyways, let's wrap this one up here. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paramount, definitely reporting from the apocalypse and the ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.